When conflicts hinder performance and begins to threaten the interpersonal harmony, then it is time to think of a few strategies in conflict management. Before this, one needs to answer a pertinent question. Are all conflicts bad? The answer to this easily has to be in the negative. Conflicts could also be imperative because conscientious at the cost of conflicts could be dangerous. The first section of this lesson attempts a definition of conflict and gives its meaning. It also discusses the type of conflicts ranging from intra-individual to intergroup conflicts. The last section, of course, focused on conflict management and seeks to suggest strategies for conflict resolution. This section speaks of importance of nurturing functional conflicts and also discusses how conflict impacts organizational behavior. We all have experienced conflict at one time or another. The most immediate reaction to any conflict would obviously be a negative one. Conflict is a perceived phenomenon. This means that if people think that they are in a conflict situation, then there is a conflict. But if they do not perceive conflict, then there is no conflict. Conflict essentially signifies an interaction amongst people and also means incompatibility and opposition. Conflict envelops a critical point in organizational interaction, when there may be a stage where people may move from harmony to conflict. This may include conflict due to incompatibility of goals, disagreement that are based on behavioral expectations, or simply differences that arise due to different interpretations of facts. Let us now look into the nature of conflict. All conflicts are not bad. There are some forms of conflict which are constructive and support the goals of the team and helps its performance. These conflicts are called functional conflicts. As against these, we have conflicts that obstruct group performance. These conflicts are termed as dysfunctional conflicts. So how does one find out whether a conflict is functional or dysfunctional? A conflict may be a task conflict, a relationship conflict, or a process conflict. The task conflict deals with work itself and its contents and goals. The process conflict deals with how the work is done, and the relationship conflicts emphasizes on interpersonal relationships. The most obvious question that one might want to ask here is, what is the value of moderate levels of functional conflict? The answer is fairly simple. The low or moderate levels of conflict will stimulate different perspectives, toss around ideas, and help arrive at the best way of doing things. Just as interaction breeds intimacy, it also breeds conflict. There are different levels at which interactions take place. These interactions operate at the individual, interpersonal, group, or the organizational level. Here we would be discussing the whole range of conflicts to get an all-encompassing perspective on different types of conflicts prevailing in an organization. Intra-individual conflict is also known to be a conflict within. We often experience such conflicts because the need-drive-goal cycle of motivation often does not reach its culmination smoothly. Let us look at the different forms that intra-individual conflict assumes. Firstly, this conflict may emerge when there are a number of competing needs and roles. For instance, in your office, you have responsibilities as a subordinate to your boss, and back home, you have a responsibility as a family member. Secondly, it may take place when there are different ways in which the drives and roles can be expressed. For instance, you may experience a conflict when you're planning to recruit people, and when you have two ways of recruiting them, either from within the organization or from outside. Thirdly, it may simply exist because of many types of hindrances that occur between the drive and the goal. For example, you have a very cunning colleague who tries to overshadow your good performance at workplace by flattering your boss in order to scuttle your promotion. And lastly, this conflict will occur when both positive and negative aspects are attached to the desired goals. For instance, you have been promised a very lucrative position by your firm's competitor, on the precondition that you divulge a few trade secrets. So then how do we analyze these forms of intra-individual conflicts? There are different approaches available to help us do this. This could include the frustration model, the goals and the roles. Let us look at each of these briefly. According to the frustration model, the most scientific explanation of frustration is that it occurs when motivated drive is blocked or hindered before it reaches its goals. Another type of conflict is termed as goal conflict. Here, the individual is faced with a goal that has both positive and negative features or has two or more competing goals. In order to understand a role conflict, let us understand first what a role is. Role can be defined as a position that is expectations which evolve from established norms. These roles could be that of a child, a parent, a student, a spouse, and so on. These roles have certain predefined expectations. Sometimes there may be cultural differences in these roles which may cause conflicts. In organizations, since we have pronounced interactions amongst employees, we are bound to have interpersonal conflicts. Transactional analysis and Johari window are two important attempts to analyze interpersonal conflicts. Referred in its abbreviated form as TA, transactional analysis was propounded by Eric Berne. TA centers around the three ego states: transactions, strokes, and games. The three ego states are child, adult, and parent. In the child ego state, the person behaves like an impulsive child and his behavior is characterized by immaturity. In the adult ego state, the person behaves like a mature adult. Here, people behave rationally and are rather cool-headed. In the parent ego state, people behave like authoritarian parents, whereby they may be either critical or loving and nurturing. Obviously, for good interpersonal relationships, adult ego state is more balanced and positive. But for a healthy personality, all three ego states should be used appropriately as per the need of the situation. Johari window presents an interesting framework to analyze interpersonal relationships. Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham propounded this model, and it seeks to identify several interpersonal styles. It basically gives us ways of interacting the conflicts that may emerge between the self and others. It says that there are certain things that we know about ourselves, as well as those that we don't know about ourselves. Similarly, there are certain things about others that we know and certain things that we don't know. In the figure here, Johari traces interpersonal relationships through four cells, namely open self, hidden self, blind self. When conflicts occur between groups, we have intergroup conflicts. An organization can be looked at as several interacting groups. Since there are several individuals who interact with one another, one can obviously envisage it as consisting of numerous interacting and overlapping role sets. We can analyze the conflicts through this role set analysis. Intergroup conflict here can be better explained through certain conditions that precede conflict. These may include resource competition, task interdependence, jurisdictional ambiguity, and status struggle. Conflict resolution is a major organizational responsibility. Conflicts undermine the health of an organization and its people, and too much of it can prevent people from performing even routine tasks. So let us see how can we resolve intergroup conflicts first. We can use any of these strategies from among avoidance, diffusion, containment, and confrontation. Johari window and transactional analysis offered a framework to analyze the interpersonal conflict and provided insight into some conflict resolution strategies. But taking this a little further, there are some fundamental strategies which can be used for interpersonal conflict resolution. These strategies can also be used for intergroup and organizational conflict resolution. The three strategies here include lose-lose, win-lose, and win-win. Lose-lose strategy simply means that both the conflicting parties ensure that neither can win. Win-lose is a common way of resolving conflicts. In any competitive society, win-lose is very common. Here one party tries to pitch up all its resources to win and the other party will lose. Win-win is the most desirable form of conflict resolution. It is beneficial both from the organizational and human perspective. Not all conflict is bad. So what then is a good or functional conflict? We already know what functional conflict is. The value of functional conflict lies in allowing constructive dissent in organizations. At times, a disagreeing employee may prove more valuable than 10 yes men. If an employee walks up to you and boldly points out your mistake, then the best way to ensure that he continues with this bold behavior is by acknowledging his attempt and by not showing any negative critical reaction to it. Always remember that people who have the conviction to stand up for what they believe in are the ones who are invaluable for helping your organization in moving in the right direction. Globally speaking, companies like Hewlett-Packard reward those who dissent and dare to go against the herd, whereas Royal Dutch Shell, Anheuser-Busch, and General Electric includes devil's advocate in their decision-making process to help them make quality decisions. So it always helps to have a little creative tension or functional conflict for organizational effectiveness. Conflict is an inevitable dimension of any organizational ambience. Conflict impacts individuals, groups, and of course organization. Often managers tend to devote a major chunk of their time to conflict resolution. In the study of organizational behavior, conflict management acquires a very special role because of its significance of maintaining a healthy and positive organizational climate. And just as we have said before, human interactions would inevitably include conflict. It is imperative for the discipline of organizational behavior to focus on conflict resolution. From an organizational perspective, conflict may be simply inevitable, but their impact can be overarching and critical. That conflict management has to be given enough organizations in growing. It is also the conflicts that hamper organizational functioning that needs to be checked. Just as too much of disharmony can be destructive, so can too much of harmony prove to be static. The right amount of conflict will impact an organization in a positive fashion and will ensure that it achieves its preordained objectives.